Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Zara and today I am going to be reacting to 1-star reviews of Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. Now, for those who don't know, Crime and Punishment, without a doubt, has been one of the greatest highlights of this year for me, reading-wise, but also just beyond my reading, just genuinely reading that book was such a visceral experience. It was such an enjoyable experience, and it's a book that I've been reflecting on ever since I read it. So I asked my patrons if anybody would be willing to help me for this video. Both Matt and Sean, I want to particularly give a shout out to because they both volunteered to pick 5 reviews each, and I haven't seen them. I'm going to react to them live right now. So without further ado, let's jump in. Actually, before I do that, I am just going to say no hate towards these people. I'm a very sarcastic person, and sometimes so sarcastic that people can't tell when I'm being sarcastic and I'm joking. So please bear that in mind. But whatever I say here is all in jest. I have nothing against these people, genuinely. Now let's start. So the first one says, some dangerous ideology. Interesting. I don't really know what this person is referring to. He could potentially be referring to Raskolnikov's ideology about how certain types of people should be elevated into places of society. But I think kind of the whole point of this book is that by the end of it, he kind of realizes that that's not a ideology to live by, because it's fundamentally quite inhuman to claim that certain types of people should be allowed to do whatever they want, even if what they're doing is criminal, illegal, morally or ethically wrong. So I don't really know what this person is referring to. I see this book like a cautionary tale, to be honest. I don't really see it being controversial from an ideology perspective. Maybe that's just me though. The second one, at long last, an opportunity to strike a blow for all high school honours English students everywhere. My otherwise favourite teacher of all time, Mrs. Meta Potts, tortured us with an entire semester of Dostoevsky. So what that it was deleted years ago? The scars burn just as much today, baby, as they did way back when. So suck it, Dostoevsky. Here's your punishment. Mwahaha. I had to do a voice saying that. How can you say mwahaha like normally? It doesn't work, does it? I don't know what this person is referring to when they say, so what that it was deleted years ago. Oh, they're like making a jest, I think, as it relates to their age. That took me a while. Okay, interesting. I mean, they're very lucky. I think they're very privileged, this person. An entire semester of Dostoevsky. I did no Dostoevsky at school. I did none of the Russian authors at school. And that's something that I lament about quite a lot, to be honest, because I think there's a lot to be taken from the Russian authors. And I just wish we'd gotten the opportunity to read one, never mind a whole semester of Dostoevsky. I'm pretty jealous, but yeah, this is quite funny. And this has just made me jealous of this person, even though I'm not a particularly jealous person. Next. Pages and pages of Raskolnikov quivering, sweating and passing out. It is remarkable that no one arrests him by page 100. His character is flat and underdeveloped, as is every other character, most of which I have seen in other books. That's not a very good critique. I mean, pretty much every book has some similarity to another character type in another book. Like there's that book, right? It's called like A Hero of 1,000 Faces or something. And it's basically talks about how there's like 7 character types that books use. And very rarely do we go beyond those 7 character types. So I don't know what this person is talking about. Like that doesn't necessarily make it bad, right? If you see a character type in another book, like that's just such a stupid critique in my opinion. He acts like a maniac and this seems to bother no one. His cryptic comments that hint at his guilt are frequent and mostly unacknowledged by his peers, and his trite redemption at the end seems forced. There is no real transition from acting like a crazy person to suddenly loving God and wanting forgiveness. In short, this book made me want to beat myself to death with it. I mean, that's pretty visceral. He definitely acts like a maniac. I do think quite a lot of the characters pick up on the fact that there isn't something right with him though. But I think the jump from like somebody sweating and quivering and passing out to they've murdered someone is quite a big jump to make. I don't think many people would make that leap in the first instance, right? Like, if I saw someone pass out on the street, I wouldn't instantly think, oh my gosh, they've murdered somebody. If I saw somebody sweating and quivering, I'd probably think they're ill and that they should go to the doctor and speak to somebody. I wouldn't, again, automatically jump to the fact that they might have killed someone. So I think this person is maybe a bit like, I don't know, I feel like they think they would clock this very easily, when in actual fact, I think the average person probably wouldn't, because, I mean, the majority of the book, like, people ask him if he's okay, and I think it's because he looks physically very ill, and that could happen for any number of reasons. I mean, Raskolnikov is not living in a particularly healthy physical environment, as an example. He also dropped out of school, so mentally there's also the possibility that he's not doing great as well. So I think that this person has just jumped to a bunch of conclusions without really thinking about it. Says all you really need to know. Next one. Terrible book. If it was written today, the editor would smack Dostoevsky with the £10 manuscript and tell him to lose half the book. A lot of the dialogue makes it feel like Dostoevsky is writing purely for word count. What? Really? The best part was the epilogue, and that ends with hints of another book that I'll never look for. Really? What book does it hint to? Because I haven't read a ton of Dostoevsky, so I don't know what other book it's hinting to. So if anybody knows, please let me know down below. I don't think dialogue is overused in this book. I don't know. Yeah, I really don't think it does. Like, I think Dostoevsky is actually very selective in the words that he uses, and I think he's very selective in how he writes this book in its entirety. I don't think there's a word wasted, to be completely honest. Like, I think every chapter, every piece of speech, every little piece like adds up to this broader picture of what is happening in this world as it relates to Raskolnikov, but also the other characters, but also the broader world as well. So I actually really disagree with this comment. Next one. So boring. A very long story with no benefits. I have read half of it and couldn't finish it. What is that? I mean, the benefit is that you read a book and you realised that you didn't like it. Whether this person has actually now done the internal work to understand why they didn't like it is another matter, but that in itself is a benefit. So you didn't actually get no benefits, but that is me making an assumption that you've actually sat down and thought about what you didn't like. This is one thing that I find really frustrating about people who review classics and say like, oh, it's an old book and I didn't get anything from it. Okay, fine. It could be that you didn't like the book and that's totally fair enough, but I've always said, like, even when I've read books that I've absolutely hated and that I think are just garbage, like a lot of Sarah J. Maas's most recent books, also Rebecca Yaros's books, Greenbone Saga is another one by Fonda Lee. Like, these are the sorts of books where, whilst I absolutely detested reading those books and I hated the experience surrounding that, every single time I read a book that I despise or that I disliked, I get something from it. But that also requires me to actually think about it. If you're just going to sit there and say, oh, well, I got no benefits from it, and then you move on, well, then obviously not, because you haven't actually done the work to understand why you didn't like it. Because that in itself is valuable. That in itself is a benefit. Like, come on, people. Use your brains. Use your brains. There's a reason why we have them. All right, next one. I remember reading this shit a long time ago in high school. Like, where did you all go to school? What is this? We don't read any Dostoevsky in school. It's so disappointing. My brothers didn't either. I did, you know, even friends that I've met later on after school, I don't think any of them have read any Dostoevsky. Like, what is this? Most of Russian so-called classic literature is depressing as. I claim that this kind of depressing content should be excluded from required reading lists. Why? That's so silly. He's basically making the claim that just because it makes you sad that you shouldn't read it. That's so dumb. This bullshit classic book does not teach much in this sense. I prefer American positive self-help books. Oh no, mate. You were onto something. I mean, I wasn't agreeing with it, but now you want to teach American positive self-help books to high school students. Really? Really? Why is most Russian literature is full of negativity and decadence? Russian culture is full of negative bullshit. I'm laughing because this guy is like completely lost it, I think. I'm glad I refreshed the content of this book and never want to come back to it. Just mark it as read or refreshed and move on. I mean, this person has the words avid reader in their username on Goodreads, and I find that absolutely hilarious. I mean, you've said that Russian culture is full of negative bullshit on, I'm going to presume, on one book. And I mean, I think calling a culture negative bullshit, basing it on maybe like a handful of books, is incredibly reductive and stupid. I think this opinion is bullshit, and I think you need to go back to school, mate. Next. Crime and Punishment is more of a punishment than anything else. I know, I'm funny. The reason for this is mostly that it seems to suffer from an old practice in publishing where people got paid for how much they wrote, not how well it sold. Thus, there are walls of text that drag on for what seems like forever, unnecessary details, and lots of information being repeated. The story buried deep in all these problems isn't that deep either. Getting the story through osmosis is honestly the best way to experience it. I don't agree with this. I don't agree that the repetitiveness is bad in this instance, because I think the repetitive nature of how the story is told, particularly when we get it through the lens of Raskolnikov, which is the majority of the book, is a reflection of this young man's mental state. He is unraveling, he's deteriorating, he himself doesn't really know what is happening because this guy is like, he's mentally ill. Like, that's the conclusion that I got at the end of it. So the fact that it's repetitive kind of reinforced that for me. So again, I do find it really interesting that people don't look at the techniques that authors use and how those techniques can reinforce some of the character traits or the plot points in the story, right? And I think a lot of people just take these techniques as like very surface level when potentially there's a deeper reason for why these techniques are being employed, and in this specific instance it's the repetitive nature of what is being said. So I don't buy it. I think look a little bit deeper under the surface. The other thing is that this person says that these problems aren't that deep. I don't understand how you can say that. Like, genuinely, how can you say that about a book that is really like demonstrative of how horrible mental illness can be and how isolating it can be? Like, I feel like you completely missed the point of the book, to be honest. Next one. I didn't love it. Obviously, being a classic, it was pretty dense and difficult to get through. But also, it was really unclear to me what the author actually believed in and what he was condemning. Does that have to be a precursor for a book to be good? I don't really get what this person is trying to say by saying that. I couldn't tell if he was slamming or celebrating socialism, capitalism, or turning to sex work in times of necessity, etc. I did appreciate some of his subversions of gender expectations, for instance, making Raskolnikov irrational and prone to fainting, while making his sister Donya a logical girl boss. DNF at 80% and read the ending on SparkNotes. And this, to me, was pretty difficult to get through because I think it shows what an ignoramus you are. Like, you've read the ending on SparkNotes. You got to 80% of Crime and Punishment, which I'm not going to lie is not the easiest book to read, but I also don't think it's that hard to read. Like, I fully acknowledge that I read a lot of classics, so maybe I'm more used to that writing style than the average person. But I think the fact that you got to 80% of the book, and then you DNF'd it, and you read the ending on SparkNotes. Like, what is this, people? What is this? Like, let's do better. Let's try to do better, okay? Next. I think this is the penultimate one. The fact that every single woman in this book is either stupid, emotionally overridden, or has some form of mental illness, mostly based in desperation, is so incredibly distracting that it puts Dostoevsky's intellect in question straight across the board. If half the planet is one-dimensional and soulless, how can we trust his view of the other half? I would have been better off reading A Telltale Heart. The pain, guilt, and sadness are there, but it would have taken a fraction of the time. And I think it's this sort of conclusion that really makes me frustrated when it comes to the classics, because you look at the previous comment and that person wrote, like, you know, Donya, Raskolnikov's sister, look at what a girl boss she is, right? And then this person is saying that every single woman in this book is stupid, emotionally overridden, or has some form of mental illness. Like come on. I said in my review of the book, which I'll link down below as well, that these women are like the real heroes of this story. They have this strength, an inner strength. They are the ones who push through and are able to handle the terrible things that happen in everyday life, and they don't let it consume them in the way that Raskolnikov does. Raskolnikov almost lets it consume him, and that is partly because of his ideology that he holds, you know, for the majority of the book, but it's also because I think because he's internalized that ideology in such a negative way, and because that ideology is fundamentally very negative as well, he's not able to truly handle having that sort of a belief, and it has like this actual physical impact on his body. We then have other characters in the book. I'm not going to say who because I don't want to accidentally spoil it for anybody, but then we have other characters who are literally forced to prostitution, and yet they're the kindest people, and yet they have strength, and yet they're defending others even though they're the most probably misfortunate of the group. Like, I don't understand how you can read characters like that and then come to this conclusion. Like, it really does make me question whether you've actually read the book. It makes me question even more so whether you've actually really thought about the book, and whether you've actually like done the work to try to understand what are quite complex characters in this world. Last but most certainly not least, we have, before this book, I scoffed at the idea of purgatory. Now, I'm a believer. This book is my personal purgatory sentence. Its awfulness is my punishment for all my sins against good literature. I've officially been sentenced to suffer through its pages. I mean, they don't give any reasons why, so I can't really critique this. I mean, if that's how it feels to you, fine, that's how it feels to you. They didn't give any reason, so I have nothing to kind of respond to. But I mean, personally, filming this video and responding to these comments is my idea of purgatory, because it just really does go to show that I don't think a lot of people really think about the literature that they read, as evidenced by some of the comments that I've had to read today. So thank you so much for watching this video. I again want to give a special thank you to Matt and Sean for picking these. All of these were great actually, and I think some of them were quite funny, but I think others also do show a bigger problem with particularly classical literature. I think a lot of people go into classic literature with these preconceived notions, and then that kind of bleeds into their reading experience. I also think with classics, you have to really sit on them and think on them and let them kind of percolate in your mind so that you can really like have a good sense of what is actually being said. But I just feel like, at least from some of these comments, it doesn't seem like most people did that. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me down below if there's any other books that you would like me to react to. It could either be reacting to 1-star reviews or 5-star reviews. Always happy to do these videos because I do find them really fun, and I think there's always a broader discussion around how we review and discuss literature as well. Thanks for watching, folks. If you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up, and I will see you in my next one. Stay safe, take care, and I will see you very soon.